I'm Claire Donovan, 32 years old, and on an ordinary Tuesday evening my family decided they no longer wanted me. It happened with a single text that read, "We think it's best if you take a step back for now. Hannah needs space." My phone buzzed once the screen glowing against the dim light of my kitchen. Aunt Margaret reacted with a little thumbs-up emoji, sealing the vote as if I'd been dismissed from a committee instead of a family. I stood there watching the microwave spin my dinner, realizing that 5 years of sacrifices had just been erased in one clean sentence. Without thinking, I typed, "Understood. I'll step back from the family fund too." When I pressed send, I didn't know those 10 words would undo the quiet empire I had built for everyone but myself. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been called the dependable one until the moment you stopped being convenient. I grew up believing dependability was love's highest form. My parents raised my sister and me in a small Missouri town where family meant showing up no matter the cost. My father, Henry, ran his life like a ledger, steady, polite, precise. My mother, Elaine, was softer, sweet-voiced, but fragile, the kind of woman who said, "We'll manage," even when she couldn't. And Hannah, 4 years younger, was their golden child from the moment she could breathe. She had the kind of beauty that made people forgive everything else: her temper, her mistakes, her chaos. I learned early that my role was to patch holes she made and keep things running. That pattern followed me long after I left home. By 27, I had built a modest life on my own. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment outside St. Louis, worked as a financial analyst, and dreamed of saving enough for a house. My days were quiet, predictable spreadsheets by day, takeout dinners by night. But one evening, as rain hammered against the windows, my father's name flashed on my phone. His voice trembled when he said they wouldn't admit Hannah to the hospital without insurance. "She's not going to make it, Claire. Please." That word "please" was rare coming from him, and before I could stop myself, I was transferring every dollar I had. $32,000 vanished in seconds. When Hannah was admitted the next morning, my parents called it a miracle. They never mentioned my name. After that, every emergency had my number attached. Mom's insulin, Dad's overdrafts. Hannah's therapy, each problem slid quietly onto my plate. I told myself it was temporary, that families helped each other, that money could buy peace. But help turned into habit, and habit turned into expectation. Somewhere between midnight payments and skipped meals, I stopped buying things for myself. I canceled subscriptions, cut corners, lived small so everyone else could live large. When I hesitated, guilt was their favorite language. Dad would sigh like I'd disappointed him. Mom would tear up, and Hannah would post something about toxic energy online. I'd give in every time. The year my father suggested we make it official, I almost felt proud. "You're good with numbers," he said. "Why not set up a family fund, something responsible?" It sounded practical, structured, adult. What I built instead was a leash. The Donovan Family Fund lived under my name, my routing number, my reminders. I paid their bills, balanced their accounts, and made sure nothing slipped through the cracks. Even Aunt Margaret's dental emergency somehow landed on my spreadsheet. Adam used to joke that I managed my family like clients who never paid their invoices. I'd laugh along, then cry later in the shower so he wouldn't hear. By the 3rd year, I couldn't remember the last time I'd said no. Every time I tried to pull back, another crisis came rolling in: a broken car, an overdraft, a late mortgage payment. It was as if the universe punished me for even thinking about rest. My parents called me the strong one, the steady one, the daughter who always had it together. I used to think those words meant love. Now I understand they were a warning. "You'll clean up our messes forever, won't you?" That night in my kitchen, when the group message arrived, I finally saw it for what it was. Not just rejection, but freedom disguised as insult. They wanted me to step back, and for once, I planned to listen. As the microwave beeped and the air filled with the scent of curry, I felt something shift inside me. The dependable daughter they'd relied on was gone, and the woman who replaced her was about to remind them what independence really costs. The first time I truly understood how deep the pattern ran, it was a rainy night in late March. I had just come home from work, still in my blazer, hair pulled back, dinner untouched on the counter, when my phone rang. The sound startled me. It was late for my father to call. When I answered, all I could hear was rain hammering against glass. His voice shook as he said, They won't admit Hannah without insurance. She's not going to make it, Claire. Please." That word please came from a man who never begged. I remember looking around my apartment as if I could find an answer in the shadows, then opening my laptop and draining every dollar from the account I'd been saving for a down payment. $32,000 gone in less than 5 minutes. When Hannah was admitted the next morning, everyone called it a miracle. They took a family photo in the hospital cafeteria smiling over styrofoam cups of coffee. My mother posted it online with a caption about answered prayers. My name never came up. But when my father called me that evening to say thank you, his tone carried a new weight relief, mixed with something that sounded a lot like expectation. After that, the emergencies kept finding me. A bounced mortgage payment, a medical copay that couldn't wait. My mother's insulin delivery when the card declined again. It was always urgent, always something that couldn't possibly fall to anyone else. At first I told myself I didn't mind. I was the one who could handle it. I'd built a steady career and lived simply. They had needs I could fill. But slowly I realized that every time I fixed something, it made room for the next disaster. A few months later, my father called with what he called a smart idea. He wanted to formalize everything to make it fair. "You're good with numbers," he said. "Why don't we set up a family fund? You can manage it so no one has to worry." It sounded reasonable, responsible even. So I created an account under my name, built a spreadsheet set reminders. Every time they sent me their expenses, I'd schedule payments, mortgage medications, car repairs, even Aunt Margaret's dental crown. I thought it would help keep things organized, maybe even teach them to be more careful. Instead, it made everything worse. Within months, they stopped asking altogether. They just forwarded invoices trusting that the money would appear. And it always did. My phone became their lifeline. Every notification meant another withdrawal, another favor, another piece of me gone. I stopped buying new clothes, skipped vacations, canceled streaming services, anything to stretch the balance. When Adam joked that I treated my family like unpaid clients, I laughed because it was easier than explaining the truth that I felt like an employee in my own life. By the 3rd year, my own world had shrunk to numbers on a screen. Every paycheck went in, every crisis drained it back out. When I looked at my account, it felt less like money and more like oxygen being siphoned. Whenever I thought about stopping, guilt choked the thought before it could form. My father's voice always found a way to remind me how much they relied on my stability. My mother would apologize for being a burden, but somehow the apology ended with me typing another transfer. I began to notice how calm everyone seemed when I handled things. There were no fights, no late fees, no worry, at least not for them. The peace in that household ran on my quiet exhaustion. I convinced myself that it was love, that this was what good daughters did. But the truth was simpler. I was their safety net, and no one ever asks the net if it's fraying. Then came Hannah's next request, the one that cracked something in me. She sent a text one afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports at work. "Could the fund cover a yoga retreat in Arizona? It's for my mental health." I stared at the message, waiting for someone else to respond. My father replied first. "That's important. Mental health counts too." My mother added a heart emoji. That was it, decision made. My silence meant consent. I felt my stomach tighten as I reread the words. A retreat wasn't an emergency. It wasn't a crisis. It was indulgence disguised as healing, and they expected me to pay for it without question. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at the fund's balance. The numbers looked lower than I remembered. A few charges didn't match any recent conversations, gas stations across town, a retreat deposit, even a patio heater from a store I'd never been to. I scrolled back through the transactions, my hands shaking a little. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow. When I finally closed the tab, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I changed the spreadsheet's name from Donovan Family Heart to Donovan Ledger. It was a small thing, but it felt right. The next morning, my father called with his usual practiced calm. "Sweetheart," he said, "maybe the fund can cover half. Hannah really needs this. I told him the fund was meant for emergencies." He chuckled soft and patronizing. "Mental health is an emergency." I paused, then said, "Then maybe she should see a therapist, not a travel agent." There was a long silence on the other end before he sighed a sound I knew too well. It was the same sigh he used when I was 12 and didn't fold the towels his way. "You've changed, Claire," he said quietly. He was right, though I didn't realize how much until later. A week after that call, a calendar invite appeared on my phone. Family check-in call, Thursday, 8 p.m. The subject line had a smiley face. I joined out of politeness, still holding on to the hope that they wanted to talk things through. Within 5 minutes, I understood what it really was. Hannah started first. "I just feel like Claire's energy has been toxic lately," she said. "It's not about the money. It's the attitude." My mother nodded, hands folded like she was in prayer. "Sweetheart, maybe just listen first," my father added. "We're saying this because we care." For a moment, I didn't say anything. Then calmly, I said, "I've been listening for years. I paid for all of you to keep talking. Tonight, I'd like to finish a sentence." The air went quiet. My father's eyes narrowed. Then he said the same phrase he'd used before, the one that felt rehearsed. "Maybe you should take a step back for a while. Give everyone some space." The words hit harder than they should have. Not because of their meaning, but because I recognized them. It was the exact line from that phone call years ago, the night I drained my savings. The same script recycled and delivered like a family tradition. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile they expected. "Okay," I said. "I'll do exactly that." They had no idea what those words meant coming from me. That night I opened the spreadsheet again. The rows of transactions glowed in the dark rent, copays, groceries, every bit of life I'd been funding. I stared at the numbers until they blurred, then began to act. One by one, I turned off autopay, canceled transfers, paused recurring bills. Each click felt deliberate, surgical. When the last toggle went gray, the silence in my apartment changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like the breath before an alarm. I poured myself a cup of coffee and whispered, "You wanted space. You're about to have plenty." The night I shut the fund down, the city outside my window barely slept. I sat at my desk, the blue light from my laptop reflecting off cold coffee and half-written notes. Each click of my mouse felt heavier than the one before it. Autopay off. Transfer canceled. Utility paused. Every motion felt deliberate, like I was dismantling a machine that had been quietly running on my back for years. When the final toggle went gray, I leaned back and stared at the silence between sounds. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint traffic outside, the soft creak of the apartment settling. For the first time, I wasn't scared. I just felt still. Around 3 a.m, my phone started buzzing. One call, then another, then dozens more. The screen lit the room in a pulse of missed connections. By sunrise, there were 89 notifications, calls, messages, voicemails stacked like layers of noise. My father's voice came first, clipped and alarmed. The bank flagged everything. "What happened?" "Are you okay?" Then my mother, trembling through her voicemail. "Sweetheart, this isn't what we meant. I need my prescriptions. Please call." And Hannah, sharp and breathless. "You're cruel, Claire. You know I needed that payment." I let the phone ring until it stopped. The quiet afterward was different. It didn't ache. It hummed calm and electric. By 8, Adam called. So he said carefully, "Space, huh?" I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in weeks. Turns out it includes my bank login. He hesitated. "You want me to come over?" I thought for a second, then asked, "Didn't your ex Mara start working in bank compliance?" His tone shifted. "Yeah. Why?" "No reason," I said. "Just curious." That question marked the moment my fear started turning into strategy. Before noon, my father texted again, "We can fix this. Just turn the automatic things back on." Then Aunt Margaret chimed in, "Families need grace." I stared at her message for a long moment before replying softly to myself, "Grace doesn't pay overdraft fees." That afternoon, the pharmacy called to confirm my mother's card had declined. The pharmacist's voice was gentle, unsure. "Would you like to update the payment method?" I took a deep breath. "No," I said. "They'll handle it." There was a pause. Then, "Are they okay?" I smiled faintly. "They will be eventually." When I hung up, I didn't feel triumph or guilt, just the strange, level quiet that comes when you stop trying to rescue people who never learn to swim. By Sunday evening, the missed calls had become background noise. My father's voicemails swung between fury and pleading. My mother's words blurred into soft apologies that always circled back to guilt. Hannah's texts bounced between tears and accusations, as if she couldn't decide which would open the door faster. I muted the thread and went on with my evening. The quiet felt earned. Then Monday morning, a new email appeared. Family Zoom, 7 guests, 2 p.m. The subject line read, "Casual check-in." The irony wasn't lost on me. At 2 o'clock, I sat at my desk in the same black sweater I'd worn the night I created the fund. There was symmetry in that. My laptop screen reflected my face, calm and steady, as I joined the meeting. One by one, the familiar faces appeared. My mother's tight smile, my father pacing behind her, Hannah's eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Aunt Margaret sat centered pearls gleaming, ready to preside like she always did. My cousin Emily hovered in the corner box, her smile too bright, trying to keep the peace. "Hi, everyone," she started, voice thin. "Let's just keep this civil, okay?" "Of course," I said. I'd hate to interrupt anyone's civility. My father leaned forward first. "You didn't have to cancel the fund, Claire. You could have talked to us." I met his eyes. "I didn't cancel it, Dad. I closed it. It was under my name, my routing number, my liability." My mother's hands twisted together in her lap. "That money was keeping us alive." I nodded slightly. "No, Mom, I was." Aunt Margaret sighed in that practiced way of hers. "Families go through rough patches, dear. You don't just turn off love." I looked at her calm. "You're right. I didn't turn off love. I turned off autopay." The silence that followed felt like the air before thunder. Then Hannah's voice broke through. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching us struggle. You made everything about control." I tilted my head slightly. "I made it about accountability." My father crossed his arms, his voice rising. "We trusted you. That was my cue." I moved my mouse and clicked share screen. The spreadsheet appeared, rows of color-coded numbers and notes filling the screen. At the top, bold black letters read, "Donovan Ledger, XLSX." My mother's breath caught. "What is this?" 5 years, I said quietly. "Every bill, every copay, every emergency you called love." The data scrolled downward. Rent payments, insulin refills, tire repairs, therapy sessions, mortgage gaps, even Aunt Margaret's dental crown. The totals stacked on the right side of the screen, the sum growing larger as I scrolled. My cousin whispered, 187,000. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. Aunt Margaret tried to smile. "Someone loves keeping receipts." I looked at her. Someone had to. Otherwise, you'd still call me dramatic instead of accurate. My mother pressed a hand over her mouth. "You tracked all this?" "Yes," I said. No one else was keeping score, and I was tired of gaslighting myself. My father's face went pale. "You didn't have to humiliate us." "I didn't," I answered softly. "I protected us until you made it clear I was the only one who had to." The silence that followed felt thick enough to touch. I switched to the next tab labeled, "What If?" The totals there showed what I could have saved enough for a small house, a modest retirement, a life. Hannah's voice broke through the quiet. "You think money makes you better than us?" "No," I said. "But it's the only thing you ever came to me for." As I spoke, my father's phone lit up beside him. He was texting, probably trying to coordinate their next move. I ignored it and opened a new document. "Before you decide who's cruel, I said you might want to see this." A PDF filled the screen. Donovan Family Wellness LLC loan application, $80,000 filed under my name with my social security number and a forged signature. My mother froze. My father stepped back like the glow of the monitor had burned him. "This," I said, tapping the document, "was submitted 2 days after you told me to take a step back." Aunt Margaret's voice wavered. That can't be right." "Oh, it's right," I said. "Carmen at the bank confirmed it this morning." Hannah's tears stopped instantly. "You went to the bank?" "Of course," I said. "Fraud tends to get their attention." My father's jaw clenched. "We were trying to help Hannah. She needs support." "No," I said quietly. "You were trying to help yourselves. You taught her that rescue was my job, but the job's over. I reached beside me and lifted a small stack of papers into view. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Every joint account authorization has been removed. Shared cards are canceled. Utilities separated. The IRS notified. My mother's voice rose brittle and small. You wouldn't. I already did. For a long time no one said a word. The only sound was the faint hum of the laptop fan. My father's face hardened. So what you want us to beg? I shook my head. No, Dad. I want you to learn how to live without draining me. I took a slow breath and said, You told me to step away. I did. Then I clicked Leave Meeting. The screen went black, and for a moment my reflection hovered there, steady, unfamiliar, free. Outside, the afternoon light shifted across the room. The world went on quiet and unaware that something enormous had just ended. Inside, the silence felt different now. It didn't echo. It belonged to me. 2 days passed after that call, and my apartment felt like the eye of a storm, quiet but charged. The phone barely stopped buzzing, yet I didn't answer a single call. My father's messages swung between fury and desperation. My mother's voicemails were soft and pleading, her words shaking under the weight of guilt. Hannah's texts filled with accusation. You ruined us. You've always been jealous. The notifications piled up like snow I refused to shovel. On the third morning, everything went still. No calls, no apologies, no noise. The silence wasn't heavy. It was clear, almost light. I spent that morning doing something I hadn't done in years. I went through my finances without worrying about theirs. Each account, each record, each password. For the first time since my 20s, every line belonged only to me. No shared authorizations, no joint cards, no quiet liabilities. My name stood clean. I closed my laptop, exhaled, and let the sound of my own breathing fill the room. That afternoon, an email appeared from the bank. Suspicious business loan application frozen pending investigation. Carmen had kept her promise. The fraudulent application under Donovan Family Wellness LLC had been blocked. $80,000 that would have been my debt was gone before it began. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the message, the late sunlight cutting through the blinds like quiet stripes of relief. That evening, Adam showed up with takeout Thai noodles and the kind of silence that doesn't ask for details. We ate at the counter, the hum of the city faint through the window. After a while, he said softly, I'm proud of you. That word proud hit something deep. It was the first time I'd heard it without conditions, without a but following after. For once, it didn't feel like approval I had to earn. It felt like truth. A few nights later, I received an unexpected call from Uncle Ray, my father's older brother, the family's black sheep. His gravelly voice carried through the line like a sound from another time. I heard what happened, he said. You're not the first, Claire. Just the first who shut the faucet off. I laughed quietly. You mean they did this before? Not the loan part, he said, but they bled me dry in the 90s. I moved states to survive it. Every generation has one who breaks the pattern. Looks like it's you. His words lingered long after we hung up. For the first time in years, I felt understood by someone who didn't want something from me. That night, I slept through until morning. No buzzing phone, no panic dreams, just the kind of quiet you earn. Days turned into weeks, and I started learning what peace actually sounded like. My mornings began with coffee instead of crisis. I started walking to work again, feeling the seasons shift instead of watching them from my office window. On weekends, Adam and I cooked instead of ordering out. The small routines built a kind of calm that felt foreign but welcome. My family didn't stay silent forever. A month later, I got a long email from my mother. The subject line read, "Family still means something." Attached was a photo of them by the Christmas tree. Gifts stacked, smiles tight the air between them, pretending to be warm. She wrote about forgiveness, about how families work through storms, about how they missed me. I read it twice, then closed it without replying. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't owe an answer. When I went back to visit the bank that winter, Carmen met me in her small office near the corner window. She smiled when she saw me. I wanted you to know, she said, the investigation confirmed the signatures were forged. Your record's clean. I nodded, unsure how to thank her. She added quietly, You did the right thing. Most people wouldn't have acted that fast. I left the bank and walked 2 blocks to the park. The trees were bare, their branches black against the winter sky. I stood there for a while, letting the cold air bite at my face. There was something peaceful about that kind of stillness, the kind that doesn't owe anyone warmth. A week later, I stopped by my old neighborhood for the first time in years. The houses looked smaller than I remembered, like time had quietly shrunk them. My parents' front porch still had the same chipped blue railing, the one I used to paint every summer. There was no car in the driveway, no sound from inside. I didn't knock. I just stood there long enough to see the light flicker behind the curtains, then turn back toward the street. On the drive home, my phone buzzed once, an unknown number, no voicemail. I didn't call back. Spring came early that year. The days grew longer, and the edges of my life softened in ways I hadn't expected. Adam and I moved into a modest apartment downtown. The floors creaked when you walked barefoot, and the kitchen window opened to the sound of church bells on Sunday mornings. It wasn't big, but it was ours. Sometimes late at night, I'd scroll back to the old group chat, the one with Aunt Margaret's thumbs up under that final message. The chat that ended it all. The words were still there. We think it's best if you take a step back. Every time I read them, I felt less sting and more certainty. They had given me permission to reclaim my own life without even realizing it. It took me months to understand that stepping back didn't mean losing them. It meant finding myself again. My peace wasn't something they could touch anymore because it no longer depended on their approval or their emergencies. One evening, as the last light faded through the blinds, Adam asked, "Do you ever think they'll reach out again?" I thought about it for a moment before answering. Maybe I said, "But I don't think they'll know who they're reaching for anymore." He nodded, understanding, without another word. The sound of the city drifted up from the streetcar horns, laughter, life, moving on. I leaned against the counter, feeling that hum of quiet again, the same one I'd heard the night I closed everything down. Only now it didn't sound like loss. It sounded like freedom. The months that followed were quiet in ways I hadn't known before. My world had shrunk to the things I could carry without breaking work, small dinners, morning walks, and the steady comfort of routine. The silence my family left behind didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. But peace has a way of drawing out what people can't stand to face, and by spring, their voices found me again. It started with a letter. The envelope had my mother's handwriting on it, tight loops, careful spacing. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo showed them sitting in the living room, Christmas lights still up in March, smiles held together like tape. Beneath it she'd written, "Family still means something." Her words were soft, almost pleading, but there was something else beneath them, a quiet hope that I'd undo everything with a single reply. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and set it aside. A week later, I came home to find Adam standing in the kitchen with a small frown. "Your dad called the house phone," he said. "Didn't leave a message." The thought of him hearing my voice on a recording must have bothered him more than losing the money ever did. That evening, I blocked the number. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I'd already said everything that needed saying. At work, I started noticing the difference between the life I'd built and the one I left behind. My energy went into projects that mattered instead of damage control. I'd stay late by choice, not obligation. My boss began trusting me with higher clients, and for the first time in years, I had enough mental space to think about what I wanted next. Freedom. It turned out was quiet but full. Then one morning in early April, a message popped up from an unknown number. "Please, Claire, just talk to me." "Mom." I stared at it for a long moment before typing a short reply. "I hope you're well. I'm not ready for that conversation." Her response came within minutes. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just didn't know how to stop needing you." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to explain. Love wasn't supposed to feel like an unpaid invoice. Later that month, Uncle Ray called again. His voice carried that same gravelly warmth as before. "How's the peace treating you?" he asked. I told him it was holding. He chuckled. "That's the trick, you know, keeping it once you've got it." Then he added, Don't be surprised if they try one more thing. Guilt's an old habit. He wasn't wrong. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Aunt Margaret titled Moving Forward. It opened with lines about forgiveness, faith, and understanding both sides. The last paragraph included a request, small in appearance but sharp in meaning. She wrote, "If you could just restart the family account for emergencies, we'll make sure no one takes advantage this time." I closed the email without finishing it. Some people confuse boundaries with cruelty because they've never seen either one practiced properly. Adam and I spent that weekend painting our living room. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee. He paused, roller in hand, and said, "You're quieter lately." I smiled. "I think I'm finally out of words." He nodded, understanding. Sometimes silence isn't absence, it's recovery. By early summer, the investigation into the fraudulent loan wrapped up. Carmen from the bank called to tell me the case was closed, no damages, no lingering ties. "You're free of it all, Claire," she said. The way she phrased it stuck with me. Free of it all. The words felt like sunlight through glass. That evening, I took a long walk downtown. The city was alive with evening chatter, people sitting outside cafes, the smell of food drifting in the warm air. I stopped near a shop window and caught my reflection, calm, unguarded, older maybe, but lighter too. It struck me how long it had been since I'd seen myself without the shadow of someone else's crisis behind me. A few days later, another envelope arrived, this time from Hannah. It was thicker, the handwriting messier. Inside was a short letter and a stack of receipts. Her note read, "I'm trying to do better. I got a job at the clinic. Mom says hi. I know I don't deserve your help, but I wanted you to see that I'm trying." The receipts showed small grocery purchases, therapy sessions, gas money things she'd actually paid for herself. I sat at the table for a long while, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. Maybe it was guilt, maybe hope, but something in her tone felt real. I didn't reply, but I didn't throw it away either. By August, the rhythm of my life felt steady. Adam and I hosted a small dinner for a few coworkers, just laughter food and the kind of easy conversation that doesn't ask for more. It wasn't grand, but it was genuine. When I cleared the table that night, I thought about all the dinners I'd missed while cleaning up someone else's mess. The time I'd given away so freely thinking it was love. Then in late September, a number I didn't recognize called again. I let it ring twice before answering. "Claire." It was my father's voice, smaller than I remembered. "We lost the house," he said quietly. "Your mother's staying with Margaret for now." I stayed silent. After a pause, he added, "I wanted to tell you before you heard it somewhere else." His words carried no accusation, just exhaustion. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I hope you both find what you need." Then I hung up. I sat by the window long after the call ended, the city lights reflecting across the glass. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible. I didn't feel relief either. Just balance, the kind that comes when life finally evens its own scale. That night, Adam came over with a small plant for the kitchen windowsill. He set it down, brushed his hands on his jeans, and said, "For new roots." I smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. I didn't know what the next year would bring, but I knew what it wouldn't: chaos disguised as family loyalty. The air in the apartment felt open, alive. The silence that used to ache now felt like music. Outside, the city glowed in the soft blue of dusk, and somewhere in that quiet light, I felt something shift, like a door closing without sound, finally letting the rest of the house breathe. The fall air came earlier than usual that year, cool enough to carry the smell of rain even on dry days. By then, nearly 6 months had passed since the night I'd closed the family fund. The chaos had quieted into something heavier distance that no one knew how to cross. When I thought about them, I pictured silence, not absence, a quiet space where noise used to live. It was on one of those still evenings that Adam found me sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through old photos. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what the answer really meant anymore. The photos felt like a different life, one built on duty, not connection. He came closer and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You don't owe them your peace," he said simply. The truth in his voice settled somewhere deep, soft, and certain. The next morning, I woke to a new email. The sender was listed as Elaine Donovan's subject line blank. My chest tightened before I even opened it. The message was short, just a few lines asking if we could meet for coffee. No pressure, sweetheart, just to talk. I'll come to you. I sat staring at it for nearly 10 minutes. The words didn't sound like her, not exactly. They sounded tired, human. I replied with a single sentence, 1 hour public place. We agreed on a cafe downtown, a spot I'd chosen carefully neutral ground. That Friday I arrived early. The hum of espresso machines filled the space, a soft soundtrack for the kind of conversations people usually avoided at home. My mother walked in right on time, her steps careful, her frame smaller than I remembered. She wore her favorite pink scarf, the one I'd bought her years ago for her birthday. It looked faded now, but she'd tied it neatly, like always. When she spotted me, she smiled, tentative, uncertain, and sat down. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You look good." I thanked her, wrapping my hands around my coffee cup to keep them steady. She sighed. "I didn't come to argue. I just wanted to see you." I nodded slowly, waiting. Her eyes watered. "Your father? He's not well. The stress, the house, everything's been too much." She paused, searching my face for reaction. "I know you don't owe us anything, but I thought maybe you'd want to know." I took a quiet breath. "I'm sorry he's struggling," I said, my tone even, "but I can't fix that anymore." She nodded, almost expecting that answer. "I figured you'd say that," she whispered. "I just didn't want you to hear it from someone else first." We sat there a while longer, speaking in cautious tones about safe things, weather work, small details that filled the space without cutting too deep. When we stood to leave, she reached out, fingers trembling slightly. "I miss you, Claire," she said, "even when I don't understand you." For a second, I almost reached back, but instead, I gave a small, polite smile and said, "Take care of yourself, Mom." Then I walked out into the cool air, the door chiming softly behind me. That evening I told Adam about it. He listened without interrupting, just nodding as I spoke. When I finished, he said, "You handled it right." Then he hesitated. "Do you feel any lighter?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Not lighter, just finished." Over the next few weeks, life slipped back into rhythm. Work was steady, simple. I started running again before sunrise, tracing quiet streets, while the world still felt half asleep. The motion cleared my mind. Some mornings I'd pass a park near the river and watch the early light hit the water. It reminded me that stillness could exist without fear. One Sunday as I was heading back from my run, my phone buzzed, a text from Hannah. "I got the job full-time, benefits and everything. Thought you'd want to know. Just that no emojis, no guilt, no expectation." I typed back, "I'm glad for you, Hannah. Take care of yourself." Her reply came minutes later. "Trying." It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. That small exchange stayed with me longer than I expected. It wasn't reconciliation, not really, but it was a sign of something human beneath all the wreckage. A quiet step forward. As October rolled in, Uncle Ray called again. He was on the road driving through Illinois. "Thought I'd check in before winter hits," he said. His voice carried a kind of grounded ease I'd come to appreciate. "Your mom called me last week," he added. "Said you two met up." I confirmed it. He was silent for a moment, then said, "You're doing the right thing, Claire. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors that you can choose when to open." I smiled faintly. "You sound like you've practiced that line." He chuckled. "Maybe I have. Took me 40 years to learn it." That night I sat by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the sound of distant thunder. The world outside felt calm in a way I hadn't known in years. The kind of calm that comes when you finally stop bracing for someone else's storm. 2 days later, I received another letter, this time from my father. The handwriting was rougher than usual, the ink uneven. He wrote about losing the house, about the weight of everything falling apart. Then near the end, one line stood out. "I'm starting to understand what I asked of you." Maybe too late, but I see it now. I didn't know if I believed him, but I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. Not to forget, but to remember where the truth finally began to surface. As the days shortened, my life settled into something steady work home. Adam's small routines that carried meaning in their simplicity. The quiet no longer felt like distance. It felt like clarity. One evening as I was locking up the office, Adam called. "Dinner's on me tonight," he said. "No arguments." When I got home, he'd set the table, candles lit, 2 plates waiting. We ate slowly, talking about everything except the past. Halfway through, he said, "You ever think about starting something of your own? Financial consulting, maybe?" I laughed softly. "You mean for people who actually listen?" He smiled. "Exactly." The thought stayed with me. Maybe peace wasn't just about escape, it was also about creation, about building something that reflected who I'd become, not what I'd survived. Later that night, as we sat by the window watching the rain, I realized how far I'd come from that first text message, the one that told me to take a step back. It had sounded like rejection back then. Now it felt like release. The next morning, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. The name came to me without hesitation, Donovan Ledger Consulting, a small nod to the life that taught me how to balance numbers and boundaries. It wasn't about revenge. It was about rewriting the meaning of the ledger itself. Outside, the city was waking up under pale autumn light, quiet and slow. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened to the rhythm of it, all the sound of a life finally completely my own. The following spring carried a quiet rhythm I'd never known before. Mornings began with sunlight spilling through the blinds, the smell of coffee, the steady sound of Adam moving through the kitchen. Life had finally settled into its own calm. My days were predictable in the best way. Client calls, small projects for the consulting business. I'd started evenings spent reading or taking walks along the park trail near our apartment. I had learned to breathe again, and that alone felt like a miracle. One afternoon, as I was finishing up reports at my desk, my phone buzzed. The name flashing across the screen made my stomach tighten. Aunt Margaret. I hadn't heard from her since the day I left that family meeting. Her message was brief. "Your father isn't doing well. You should come." I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone face down. The words didn't stir panic the way they used to. They just sat there quiet and heavy, waiting for me to decide what kind of person I wanted to be now. That night, I told Adam about it over dinner. He listened carefully, his fork motionless halfway to his plate. "Do you think you'll go?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Maybe I said finally, but not to fix anything, just to see it clearly. He nodded understanding. There was no lecture, no persuasion, just quiet support, the kind that never asked for more than honesty. 2 days later, I drove to the small rehab clinic where my father had been admitted. The parking lot was half empty, the spring air sharp with the scent of cut grass and disinfectant from open windows. Inside, the hallways were lined with faded photographs of mountain landscapes and motivational phrases that seemed too cheerful for the weight they carried. When I reached his room, he was sitting upright in bed, thinner than I remembered, his face pale but alert. He looked up when I walked in, surprise flickering before it softened into something closer to relief. "Claire," he said quietly, as if testing whether the words still belonged to him. I stood in the doorway for a moment, then stepped closer. "Hi, Dad." The air between us felt fragile, like glass that could break with the wrong tone. He gestured toward the chair beside his bed. "Sit, please." I did. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't angry this time. It was the kind that comes when two people run out of ways to pretend. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Your mother told me about your business. Said you're doing well." His voice carried no sarcasm, just exhaustion. I nodded slightly. "I am." He looked down at his hands, the skin marked with faint bruises from IVs. "I'm glad. You deserve that." I didn't know how to respond, so I said nothing. The hum of the air conditioner filled the pause. After a moment, he said, "I kept thinking about that night, the call, the fund, all of it. I told myself I was helping everyone hold things together, but really I just didn't want to admit I'd lost control." He looked up, eyes clearer than I'd seen in years. "You were right to stop it. You saved us from ourselves." His words caught me off guard. For so long I'd stopped expecting accountability from him. Hearing it out loud felt both foreign and strange. "That doesn't erase what happened," I said quietly. "But I appreciate that you see it now." He nodded slowly. "I do. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to leave things unsaid. We sat there for another hour speaking softly about small things, work, whether memories of my grandfather's old fishing trips. When it was time to go, he reached for my hand. His grip was weak but steady. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Even if it's just this once." I nodded. "Take care of yourself, Dad." As I walked down the hallway toward the exit, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. Outside, the air smelled of rain and lilacs from the garden beds near the parking lot. I stood there for a long time, breathing it in, the wind cool against my skin. Closure didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. That evening I called my mother. She sounded surprised but relieved. "He told me you came," she said. "It meant a lot to him. I didn't ask how she was managing. Some questions only reopen wounds." "I'm glad he's getting help," I said. There was a pause before she answered. "So am I. Maybe we'll all get a second chance to do things better." Her voice carried both hope and hesitation, as if she knew better than to expect too much. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work. The consulting business grew faster than I'd expected, mostly referrals from small companies that wanted help reorganizing their finances. People trusted me with their numbers the way my family once had, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't obligation. It was purpose. Each client reminded me of something I'd learned the hard way, that structure and boundaries can heal what chaos once broke. In late May, I received an email from Hannah. It was longer than her usual messages. She wrote about her new job at the clinic, about saving for her own apartment. Near the end, she added, "I didn't understand what you were trying to teach us back then. I do now. I hope someday we can start over, even if it's small." I read it twice, then typed back, "One day at a time. I'm proud of you." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, it was room to grow. That weekend, Adam and I drove to the coast for a short break. The air smelled of salt and cedar, and the sound of waves carried through the open windows of our rental cottage. On the second night, as we watched the sunset paint the horizon gold, Adam turned to me and said, "You look like you can finally breathe." I smiled. "Maybe I can." He reached for my hand. "You did the hardest thing, learning to stop saving people who didn't want saving." His words lingered as the sky deepened into dusk. For years, I had measured love by sacrifice. Now I was learning that love could be steady, gentle, and quiet. When we returned home, I checked the mail to find a small envelope addressed in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a folded card and a photograph. It showed the four of us years ago, before everything began to fracture. On the back she'd written, "For the memories that still matter." I placed it in a drawer beside my father's letter, not as a keepsake of pain, but as proof that even broken things can be acknowledged, if not repaired. That night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, I opened my laptop and reviewed my client list. The name of my company, Donovan Ledger Consulting, appeared in neat letters at the top of the page. I stared at it for a while before saving the file and closing the screen. The ledger that once defined my exhaustion now marked my independence. Every number, every choice was mine. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the wet pavement. I thought about the people I'd left behind, the ones who'd finally learned that silence could be its own kind of answer. I didn't feel anger anymore, just peace, the kind that comes when you finally balanced every account, emotional and otherwise. I turned off the light, letting the room settle into quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the rhythm of rain. Adam's soft breathing from the next room, it all blended into the sound of a life finally in balance. The following winter came softly wrapped in long evenings, and the kind of quiet that makes you notice small things again, the hum of the heater, the way light moves across a wall, the sound of someone breathing beside you in sleep. For the first time in years, my life felt steady. The noise that used to fill my days had finally faded into peace. By then, my father was back home. His health had improved, and he'd started attending community meetings, small steps toward the man he could have been all along. My mother sent me short updates every few weeks, practical things gentle in tone, never asking for more than I could give. We didn't rebuild what was broken, but we found a quiet understanding, the kind that exists when people finally accept the truth about each other. Hannah stayed in touch too. Her message is lighter now. She told me about saving for her own apartment, about helping others at the clinic who reminded her of herself. Sometimes she'd send a photo from her lunch break, a small moment of life shared without strings attached. I always answered. Slowly, the past began losing its sharp edges. My own work grew in ways I hadn't expected. Donovan Ledger Consulting found its footing, and I built a small team of people who believed in clarity over chaos. Every client carried a story behind their numbers, someone trying to start over, protect their home, or keep their dream alive. I understood them better than I ever thought I would. Helping others find stability became its own kind of healing. It turned pain into purpose. One afternoon, Carmen from the bank stopped by my office. She smiled when she saw the plaque on the wall with my company's name etched in clean silver letters. "You really did it," she said. "You turned the worst part of your life into something solid." I thanked her, remembering how she'd once been the voice that warned me just in time. "You know," she added, "I've seen hundreds of accounts, thousands of transactions, but the ones that stay with me are the people who learn to take back their power. You're one of them." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That evening, Adam and I walked along the river, where the city lights shimmered on the water. The air was cold enough to see our breath. He reached for my hand and said, "You seem lighter lately." I smiled. Maybe because I'm finally living a life that doesn't need fixing. We stood there for a while watching the reflection of headlights ripple across the current. The world kept moving quiet and endless. Later that week, I cleaned out an old drawer at home and found the envelope that had started it all, the one with my family's group message printed on paper. The words were still there. "We think it's best if you take a step back for now." I read them once more, then folded the paper neatly and placed it in a box of old documents. Not as a wound, but as proof of how far I'd come. They had told me to step back, and I did, but not in defeat. I stepped back to see clearly, to rebuild on my own terms. Sometimes people assume justice looks like revenge or triumph. For me, it looked like peace. It looked like waking up without dread, choosing quiet over noise, and forgiving myself for the years I mistook exhaustion for love. Boundaries didn't end my family. They redefined what love could look like when it wasn't built on debt. My father learned accountability, my sister learned independence, and I learned that walking away isn't abandonment, it's survival with grace. Now when I think of the ledger that once held every payment and every wound, I see it differently. It's no longer a record of what I lost. It's a balance sheet of lessons earned, each one proving that peace is worth more than any apology. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that closure doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it comes quietly when you stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening. It comes when you forgive the part of yourself that stayed too long and start choosing the version of you that leaves when it's time. So if you're listening right now and you've ever been the steady one, the one who holds everything together, remember this: being dependable doesn't mean being disposable. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to stop carrying what isn't yours. Before I go, I'd love to know, have you ever had to draw that kind of line in your own life? Share your story in the comments. And if you're still finding your footing, stay a while. You're in good company here, because sometimes taking a step back is the first real step forward.